So I thought we'd just start off a small video series on just doing bits and bobs, and I thought, well, let's just start with power swords. They're fairly straightforward to do. Uses a couple of techniques such as your sort of basing, layering, glazing, and a small amount of edge highlighting as well. So I just thought I had this spare sword kicking about, so let's just paint it up and see how we get on. So we've just started off by giving the sword a quick prime with Chaos Black. I typically use this for everything regardless of the base coat that I'll be using afterwards, even if it is white sometimes, because I'm just a sucker for punishment that way. But you can also use your Vallejo primers through the airbrush as well if you want, but I thought for the purposes of this video we'll keep it simple. We'll not include the airbrush for this particular example. So for this video, in particular when it comes to brushes, we're going to be using a size 4 Artisopus Series S. This will just be to put down that initial base coat, and then from there we'll go on to use the size 20 Rosemarine coat. It's likely that I'll use this for pretty much everything we do. Some people like to use brushes with much bigger bellies when it comes to doing glazes and whatnot, but I don't know, for me personally this works. I just like to use the 2 zeros for most things. So for the video, if you want to just get the sort of base result that you're after, these are the paints that we'll be using. So we'll be using AK 3rd Gen Black, Citadel's Kantor Blue, Sotek Green, Temple Guard Blue, Baharoth Blue, and AK 3rd Gen White. Now you don't need these two. If you have, for example, something like a Baton Black or White Scar, that'll work just as fine. However, the pigment density within these two paints aren't, I think aren't as good as the AK paints, so I tend to stick to these. They're just significantly more reliable for me. A couple of other things we might do if we want to sort of take it up to the next level is at the end what I might do is run a glaze of Talassar Blue over the top of the blade, just to bring a bit of saturation back into the blade. Because depending on how far we go with glazes and highlights and whatnot, it could very well lose quite a bit of saturation. To keep things smooth when it comes to glazing, what I'll also use is Dale Brownie's Glaze Medium. This is the matte medium. So this is like almost like a gel consistency that you just sort of mix with water. You mix it down to almost like a medium, like lamine medium. Again, if you don't have that, lamine medium will work just fine. So starting off here, we're just going to take the size 4 Artisopus and just take a bit of Sotek Green. So in terms of paint consistency and paint management, I like to try and get this relatively thin. Not too thin. I guess I'll have to show you in the back of my hand. Something kind of like that. So it's still got coverage, but it'll still probably take a couple of layers to get that down onto the miniature fully. So we'll just see how many layers it takes. Some people usually say it takes 2 or 3 layers. I like to keep things as smooth as possible, so I've seen myself do it upwards of 5 or 6 layers in the past just to get a nice smooth result. So let's get to it. So just going quite quick across the length of the blade. Getting in about these power nodes as well can be a bit of a pain sometimes. So as you can see, the paint is still quite transparent, but that's fine, because once that dries, what we'll do is we'll apply another layer. 5 thin coats, and as you can see, the coat is really smooth. There's no lumps or bumps, there's no textures, nothing like that. There's no detail obscured, and that's me just after hitting that with a hairdryer. So there might still be some deeper recesses of paint that's still to dry, and that should smoothen out even more in the end. So yeah, now that the foundation's down, we can sort of start to get onto the fun bit now. So what we'll do is we'll start to do a little bit of value sketching on the blade, and for that what we'll do is just sort of, as I say, sketch out the other colours just in quite thin layers, make sure everything's placed correctly, and then we'll go from there, and then we'll start to smooth things out. Alright, let's have a go at that then. So starting off with a little bit of Talassar Blue. So what we're going to do, we're basically just thinning it to like almost like a heavy glaze. So if I show you, it's probably still even a little bit too thin for a value sketch. So you're just going to have to play around with it until it sort of feels quite right. Yeah, so that's probably about right. So what we'll do is we'll do that, and we'll start to sketch in the transitions for this. I thought we'd just do the sort of bog standard alternating pattern that you see on these blades. So we'll maybe go, where do we want to start? We'll go light here, go light, dark, light, and dark, light, dark. Right, so we'll just start with that Talassar Blue. Let's load up the brush. So the brush really doesn't have that much on it at all. I would probably take a little bit more of that off actually. So even just on the back of your hand, just take a little bit extra off. Then we'll just start to sketch in. So taking quite a relatively broad area. You probably won't see this on camera too much because the colours are quite similar. But as we go along, we'll start to see the colour start to come out a little bit more. So just going along, just sketching that in really roughly. And because these layers are quite thin, they do dry pretty quickly. So already I can see that I can go back in here and just get that on there. This bit's just about dry. And just going again. And we're not too worried at this point about being particularly neat. We just want to get the values placed down, and then we can worry about smoothing all the blends out later on. So where things are taking a little bit longer to dry, we'll just hit it with a hairdryer. As we go, I'm just typically covering less and less area just to get a very, very rough transition. So you can kind of start to see that now, but as we start to get more contrast into the blade, when we get the darker parts in, we'll start to see that look a lot more radiant, vibrant, whichever word you want to use. So we'll just keep going until I think we're ready just to start the next colour. Time to get darker with paint. Right, so I'm using Kantor Blue now. So again, we're keeping the same kind of heavy glaze consistencies. Yeah, something like that, not quite a layer. So normally what some people would tell you to do is to sort of mix between the mix between your last colour and then your darker colour, but I think to keep this easier, I figured it's probably best to not do that just now, and we'll just stick to pure colour. I say pure colour from a bottle rather than mix. Right, let's go. So I still want to keep some of that Sotek Green showing through. This is where it does start to get just a tiny bit trickier, just because the areas that you're painting are getting smaller and smaller. Right, let's get down in here. So I'm just looking to see where I think there's any sort of harsher transitions. Just very lightly painting over them as I deepen the colour elsewhere. Okay. Nice. So you can still actually see the kind of harsher transitions that are there, and we are going to go in and smooth those out. So what we'll do now is we'll try and deepen this all the way down to black. I say all the way down to black. We'll mix it. For the first time we'll actually start to mix paints just a little bit. I don't want pure black, I don't want pure white. So we'll start to mix black in with the Kantor Blue, and then we'll mix white in with the Baharoth Blue. Then we'll start to bring up those points of light in those deepest areas of shadow. Right, so this is where we start to do our first very basic mixes now. AK Black's really densely pigmented, so you only need a very small amount of it. I like to try and keep my mixes slightly separate on the palette. So I'll just take literally just a dot of that. Probably a little bit more. That looks... The area that we're going to be painting this time is going to be significantly smaller. It is really, really useful to get magnifiers if you can. I think I'll try and link mine in the description for anyone that's interested. Not affiliated or sponsored or any of that jazz, but yeah, very, very useful. Right, so the area that we're looking at now is so small. Now this is where brush control really comes into its own. Now brush control is basically just being able to get rid of the shakes, more or less. So when you're painting, you can see that I'm only going over a tiny, tiny little area. And I think the best way to get better at this is to do something called deliberate practice. So what I would usually do is if I'm painting a squad or blade guard or something like that, when it comes to doing blades like this, I'll specifically set time aside to actually go over the blades and actively try to be better at it. That sounds neither here nor there, but believe me, it's something that's worth doing because you'll surprise yourself. I started doing it on purity seals a good couple of years ago, and I used to watch the Darren Latham videos before the man forced him to take them down. At least that's my theory. And the more I did it, each time I thought, right, I'm going to do this better and better now. I'm going to make this one better than the last one. And eventually, you just start noticing that, hey, I can actually do this quite well. And then people start complimenting your work and asking how you did it. Right, so that's looking quite dark, but it's looking quite unbalanced. Here there's more of a mid-tone, less of a mid-tone here. So what we're going to do now is try and sort of balance the piece out a little bit. So this is where the fun starts. This is where we start to really start refining things, smoothing blends and doing lots of glazing. And I'll talk you through how I do that, talk you through my approach, so you can try and follow along if you wish. Right, so let's start refining some midtones. Right, so I've got a blob of my Glaze Medium. So this is how you use it, because no one really taught me how to use it. I'm just gonna have to figure it out. So we'll take the size 4 brush, load it with water, and just get the stuff wet. Just thin it right out. So that's looking about right. Then you can start to introduce some of your pigment into that. And now we're going to try and get this down to a glaze consistency. This might be okay as is at the moment. We might want to thin it a little bit more. So let's have a look. Yeah, so you can see there's pigment there, right, but it's so thin, it's basically acting like a filter, and that's dry already. So it acts as a filter, and the more filters you put on, the more colour will start to appear. So there's a few ways you can do this. Number one, you could leave it here. This will look fine on the tabletop. Or you can go crazy with it. So we're going to go a bit crazy with it. Now, some people would say this is quite an advanced technique. I would agree, more or less. Once you get the hang of it, it'll open so many doors for you. So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to start looking for those areas that need a bit more refinement. And we're going to take that thin paint and we're just going to start doing little glazes, just like that. Right, now it doesn't look like much. Doesn't look like much is happening right now. But after a good couple of passes, this will start to look really smooth. So let's just keep going with that. Now, given that this can take quite a while, I might have to speed this section up a bit. Already this is looking like it's the problem spot, because that horrible bit that we looked at before that we tried to fix is still showing through. So this area is probably going to take a little bit of refinement to do, but that's fine. We've got the time. So what we're doing is now we're taking the Talassar Blue and we've thinned it down to a glaze consistency, and we're just trying to essentially refine the blends between the mid-tone and that sort of first highlight. So the paint is very, very thin now, so it's almost like just pigmented water at this point. So one trick that you can do to try and get these really smooth blends is a thing called stippling, or stipple glazing. So with that paint super thin, it looks like I'm doing nothing right. But what's happening is tiny amounts of glaze consistency paint is being deposited on that blade. And once you go over a certain area, a certain amount of times, that blend starts to refine more and more. So if I just continue on with that, you'll see this piece just starts to get hyper smooth. And I would argue that that gets smoother than an airbrush because you don't have that sort of speckled texture. So there's no right or wrong way for how long you should do this. You just do it until it looks smooth. What I would say though, however, is when you do it, you want to spend more time focusing stipples in a central area and then stipple less as you get out to either side. Because the more dense the dots are in one specific area, the more that colour will show up. So this is a very long-winded way of doing this, right? But it guarantees you excellent results. Now it can also go wrong. You can sort of overdo it, then you end up with sort of areas that are just a bit blocky or just still look a bit harsh. Like here, you can correct that. Just taking that same paint, that same consistency. Just do your traditional glazing over the top. Okay, rid of any bits of texture. So that's starting to look pretty good. Let's just keep going. Right, so now we're just taking a little bit of white and we're just going to mix that into the Baharoth Blue and just get a nice baby blue colour. You could use Blue Horror if you've got that instead. Basically anything that's lighter than Baharoth will do just nicely. So we'll use that and we'll get to it. Right, let's go. So just closer to the centre of the blade. We're getting these almost, it's almost like a little semicircle. And believe me when I say this will make a huge difference. It's not coming across on camera too well just now, but we'll look at it at the end and see how it all comes together. Just doing that on the tip. And again, close to the centre of the blade. Right, it's looking good. And just as a quick demo to see how far we've come, that's kind of where we started versus where we are now. Okay, so it's not looking too bad. So I think what I'm going to do is to not sort of repeat too much of what I'm doing. I'm just going to go away. I'm going to neaten up the blends and whatnot a little bit more off camera. So for a bit of transparency, just so you know what I'm doing as I make these adjustments, when I'm looking for uneven transitions and I find something that I'm not too happy with, this is literally what I'm doing. So here, for example, I just want to smooth this piece just a little bit. So I've taken some Temple Guard Blue and literally just doing micro dots. And it looks like nothing's coming off the brush, as I said earlier. But this is making the smallest changes that when you step back and take a look at it, it makes a fair difference. Now you will get to a point of diminishing returns where you're just putting on dots for the sake of putting on dots, but if you continue to do this, this blade is going to be mega smooth. But yeah, that's been another 5-7 minutes, something like that, so I'll keep going and come back. Right, so what we're going to do, it's a little bit extra, but I'm going to take a little bit of a mix of satin varnish and ultra matte varnish, just to get somewhere in between the two, and we're going to mix that in with the Talassar Blue just to make really heavy glaze, just so that we can shift the hue of the blade ever so slightly towards that more electric blue colour. And I'll put that mix together and I'll come back and we'll get that on the blade. I'll just stick to my size 4 just to get this on, just for the sake of speed. And with these mediums, what it'll also do is give the blade a consistent finish. That's a really, really subtle shift in hue. Probably shouldn't go over that again that quickly. Alright, so that's tied all the layers together as well. So let's just get an edge highlight on this. And then we're done. So to do the highlight, I've just taken the last mix that we made of white and Baharoth Blue. Just using the 2-0 brush. Taking most of the paint off the brush for the edge highlight. Make sure I'm in focus. I'm almost just skipping across the edge. If I wanted to be super fine and super refined, you could use the tip of the brush and just go really slowly, but I'm not a psycho and I'm not doing it. Right, one edge. What's to do with it? Yeah. If anything, it's almost like a, not a dry brush, but like an overbrush, where there's still enough paint on the brush. It's not going to run out of control, but not so little that it could act as a dry brush. And these types of edges just lend themselves perfectly for this. And now we need to do the middle one. So I'm going to start down here, just to try and get that done out of the way. It's a little bit janky, but we'll go over it a couple of times if we need to. I'd rather it be too thin now than too thick and rubbish. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. So really, when you're doing edges like this down the middle of a blade, just spend the time on it. Don't rush it, especially if you want to start painting to more of a display level. Just start here. Oh god. And inside my head right now, I'm screaming. This line's a wee bit wonky. Okay, that kind of fixed it. Now, I'm going to take some white, some pure white, and I'm just going to put in some dots. So one right here, that's a little bit thick. One right there, and one at the very tip. So there we go, I went out and blacked out the other details surrounding the blade just to give a bit more focus on it. Went round, added a couple more little bits of white here and there just on the very tip. Just tried to even things out generally. Nothing that you haven't already seen, but yeah, that is the blade. If you have any questions, comments, or if there's anything else you want to see, if you want to see that power node or the rest of the arm, we can do that. We can look at edge highlighting perhaps in a future video. Let me know in the comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Yeah, see you in the next one.